welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Colleen Thompson, and it is November 20th, and this is webinar 225. We have Dr. Bruce Boynton with us. He was with us a couple of months ago as well, and he has just had an amazing career in healthcare, research, public health, medical publishing, and medical administration. He's been a professor of pediatrics and a pulmonary physiologist. He was also a director of an infectious disease research lab in Cairo, Egypt. He was also in the Navy. He was commanding officer of the USNS Comfort, which was a 1,000-bed hospital ship, and deputy inspector general of the U.S. Navy Medicine, and statewide director of correctional medicine in Mississippi and New Mexico. And he's currently the editor of the Journal of Health and Human Experience. And of course, he's a member of the AIA Board of Directors and a member of the Clinical Research and Research Steering Committee. And tonight, he's going to be talking to us about how to read a research paper. And this is all part of a three-part series that is being put on by the AIA Research Committee. So thank you very much for being with us tonight, Bruce, and thank you everybody for being here as well. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, and good evening, everyone. And we're going to talk about how to read a research study. Reading a research study is different than the kind of reading we ordinarily do. You might think of our recreational reading or even textbooks as visiting a friend at their home. And you might have dinner, watch TV, play a game, chat, whatever. But what if the friend said, I'm thinking of moving. I want you to do a valuation of my home. Well, you couldn't just stay in the living room. You'd have to dig in, look to see if the foundation was cracked, if the roof leaked, if they have a basement, do they have a sump pump, where are the schools, what's the access to this place. So it's a completely different way of reading. You have to search. Now, a lot of people say, why should I read research studies? Most of them are boring, and very often they're complicated and confusing. And they might not have anything to do with what you do. If you're a clinical aromatherapist or you make products to sell, maybe research doesn't have that much to do with what you do. The other thing is they take a long time to read, and a lot of people are busy. But there's reasons to read research studies. First, the books that you read are 1 to 2 years out of date. And that's just because of the publication time. You have to write the article or the chapter, you go to your references, and then the publication, by the time the book is out, the studies that you referenced are out of date. The second thing is that research studies explicitly state what they did so that you can replicate the study. That's very important because you might get different conclusions than they do. Some authors share raw data, and you can compare it right there with your own experience if you're a student of that area. Research studies allow you to evaluate conclusions critically. In fact, that's one of their main purposes. The author will do a study and get results and draw conclusions. Does their data support the conclusions that they draw? And that's up to you as the reader to determine. The other thing I found is research studies stimulate new ideas about therapy. You think, well, I could do that, or I could change this and do that. So I think they're really valuable to clinicians. Now, what is the first question to ask before you read a research study? Anyone have any ideas? Why am I reading this research study? When I was in school, I tried to read everything, and I read a lot of really boring studies that I've completely forgotten that didn't have anything to do with what I was doing. Don't read those studies. Familiar yourself with the area of study. You could also investigate a new research method. There's new ones coming out all the time, or evaluate the truth of the author's claims. There have been a number of famous authors. One of them was a 18th century English historian named Edward Gibbon. And before he read a book or an article, he would write down what he hoped to gain by reading it. And then he would read it, and then he would look back at his papers and see whether he found out what he was hoped to. How research studies are organized. This is sort of a list of the different contents that you'll find on most studies. First, there's the title and author information, like what their degrees are, where they work. Keywords, which are used in indexing. The abstract, which is a microcosm of the article. The main points in the article can be found or should be found in the abstract. Then there's the introduction, which presents the problem which the study hopes to attack, the methods, what they did, the results, what they found, and what they concluded. Actually, a lot can be learned about the study without even reading it. For instance, is the research peer-reviewed? Is the work cited by other scholars? If no one pays any attention to your article, it probably wasn't that impactful. What are the author's credentials? Is there a conflict of interest? Is the article published in an academic journal or a throwaway? Who funded the research? Do they have an interest in the results? And how old is the study? Is the research peer-reviewed? Most academic journals send their manuscripts to people in the field. They have a board of consultants who review the article and give their opinion about whether it warrants publication. And your peer reviewers they are a form of academic quality control, but they can be real tough, and usually are. Is the article in a top-tier academic journal? Because the top academic journals tend to be more selective about what they publish, more conservative. They undergo a more rigorous peer review, and they have a greater impact on the field. So what are some examples of top-tier academic journals? Well, in the general sciences, we have Nature, Science, Molecules, PLOS, and BMC. It's up to you to figure out the top journals in aromatherapy. Is the research cited? Well, there's a citation rank of studies, and in general, the more citation rank is a measure of the impact on the field. For instance, if everyone is going to your article that's to publish in that field, then it's probably a pretty important article. And you can find citation rank in Google Scholar or Citation and Index. Sometimes this is overdone. For instance, if someone pioneers a new method and that method takes off, even though their research was not, maybe they didn't have any big conclusions, still that has an impact on the field because all the other scholars are going to it to use your method. Who funded the research? Does the funding agency have a stake in the outcome? Compare a article published by National Institute of Health versus one that's done by Big Pharma. Well, the Big Pharma don't publish their failures. They tend to suppress them, in my opinion. What are the author's credentials? Are they known experts in the field? Have they done prior research in this area? Where do they work? Are there any conflicts of interest? The conflicts of interest may slant the conclusions, and there should be a statement about any conflicts of interest in the author statement. How old is the study? An old study in a rapidly developing field may be outdated, or it could be a classic. But consider this. What about an article about artificial intelligence from 10 years ago? It's not likely to be current. Okay, let's get an overview of a research study. As we said, reading a research article is not like reading a novel, and you may have to read the article several times. The first thing to do is skim the article. Is it something you're interested in? How is it organized? Look up any terms you don't understand. And always check out any charts or graphs. A lot of data is presented in charts and graphs, and you can get an idea about whether you want to go through the whole article or whether you want to turn to something else. Now let's tackle the article in depth. Start with the title. What's the article about? Then move on to the authors. Who are they? Are they experts? Where do they work? Then read the abstract. Okay, consider this title. I'm having some problems because your beautiful pictures are covering up some of the text here. Okay, consider this title. Selected antimicrobial essential oils eradicate Pseudomonas and Staphylococcus aureus biofilms. Okay, well, I'm interested in essential oils. I'm interested in their antimicrobial properties. Pseudomonas is a notorious, it's a water bug that gets in ventilator tubing and things like that, and it's often a nosocomial infection. Staph aureus, of course, is everywhere. Biofilms, I'm not familiar with that, but I can look it up. All right, the authors and institutions. Doctors Kavanaugh and Ribic. I don't know them. I haven't run into them before. Are they experts? I don't know. They work at MIT. That's a very good research institution, though. Maybe I'll take a chance on it. The author note should include conflicts of interest, the funding source, and compliance with regulatory bodies. Like that's where in the author note is a good place to put that this was reviewed by the Institutional Review Board on such and such a date, and they gave it such and such a number, and they approved it right there in front on the first page of the article. Now the abstract. As we said, the abstract is the article, the research study in microcosm. So it should have something about background, introduction, methods, results, how you chose the participants, and a conclusion. It's sort of like if you remember those funny spy films, it's sort of like the abstract is like mini-me. Okay, here's an abstract from that title. Biofilms are difficult to eliminate with standard antimicrobial treatments due to their high antibiotic resistance relative to free-living cells. Here, we show that selected antimicrobial essential oils can eradicate bacteria within biofilms with higher efficiency than certain important antibiotics, making them interesting candidates for the treatment of biofilms. Well, it's easy to read that abstract, but it doesn't have a lot of detail. It motivates the study. Biofilms are difficult to eliminate with standard antimicrobial treatments. What antibiotics are they talking about? In the second part, we show that selected antimicrobial essential oils, which ones? I want to know, can eradicate which bacteria within biofilms. So I would not give this abstract an A because it doesn't have the kind of detail that a prospective reader would want. Introduction. After the abstract, keywords, title, etc., comes the introduction, which provides a motivation for the study. What's the background or context for the study? What problem is it supposed to engage? What do the authors want to know? What is the hypothesis? Is the hypothesis testable? Then there's something called post hoc hypotheses. This is a bad thing. A post hoc hypothesis is you get your results and then you change your hypothesis to match your results. That's cheating. You can't do that. You can prove anything that way or purport to prove anything. Let's talk about hypotheses. A good hypothesis that explains what you expect to happen is understandable and measurable and has independent and dependent variables. When I change the independent variable, the dependent variable also changes. Let's take some possible hypotheses. Girls are smarter than boys. Is this a good hypothesis? It may be true, but what girls? How are you going to measure smarter? See, it's so too vague. All right, what about this one? Aromatherapy is better than allopathic medicine. Well, in some ways it is, but if you have a broken leg, I would choose another therapy rather than essential oils. What about this one? Students who eat breakfast before math tests score higher than those who don't. Well, that's a good hypothesis. We can measure We can ask who ate breakfast or who didn't eat breakfast. We have the math test scores, which are obviously measurable, and they can be compared with the students who didn't eat breakfast before the math test. So that's a good hypothesis. The top two, not so good. Methods. The methods should be in great detail. What did the authors do? Look for exquisite detail so that you would be able to replicate their work. Do the authors cite the statistical tests they use? Here's an example of problems with methods. Suppose the authors use in their study lavender essential oil. What do you want to know about lavender essential oil? Well, the first thing I want to know, is it true lavender or spike lavender or lavandine? What company was the essential oil sourced from, and what country? What batch? Did they do a GCMS to find out what's really in it? Who are the subjects? Are they all children, adults, men, women? How were they selected? Let me give you an example of that, why that's important. Where I went to school, a woman was studying depression in women. And so she got a bunch of telephone numbers and called them up and asked them. But what about people who lost their phones? What about people who didn't have phones? What about people who were so poor that they couldn't afford the Verizon bill? They might be depressed too. So that's an error. If you take your subjects, let's take another example. What if you were studying cognitive effects of menopause in women, and you drew a sample of people to study, but the people were all men. They obviously know nothing about menopause. Finally, how did the researchers use the lavender essential oil from above? Did they ingest it? Did they use it topically? Did they sniff a bottle under their nose? If so, for how long? Did they diffuse it into the room? So these details are very, very important in enabling other researchers to replicate the project. Results. What did the authors find? Now, pay special attention to tables, figures, and graphs. And do those tables, figures, and graphs tell a clear story? Here's an example here. There are some people who like pie charts, and there's some people that don't. In a way, this is a study in which people could make, say, political comments on the site, and what they're checking is whether the authors of these comments use pseudonyms, or they just said anonymous, or they said exactly who they are. Now, it would be easy to show these three numbers. In fact, you don't even need a graph. You just have these three numbers. But you could show a bar graph, for instance. But in a pie graph, you're comparing. It's easy to tell differences in length. Differences in area is more difficult for our eye to see. Let's take that one step further. let's say you have two glasses of different shapes. They could have different volumes. So it's harder for us to tell difference in volume than it is area, and it's harder for us to tell difference in area than it is length. Now, the other thing you see that they've done in this graph is they have tipped the graph on its side. So we're supposed to be looking at this area and this area. This doesn't mean anything at all, I guess. But it makes it more difficult to compare areas when it's tipped. So that's why this is not a good graph. And what's this thing here? It looks like in a cartoon, when people speak, they write the number. So I don't know what this has to do with anything. Is this part of the area that we're supposed to add to this? You see, this is not a good graph. Now, for another one, look at this. All I can tell from this is the Secretary of Health and Human Services has a lot of people reporting to them. But you can't make sense of this. There's too much information. A graph should be able to be understood in 10 seconds. All you can see from this is there's a lot of stuff going on. All right, what about this one? This is date down here. You can think of this as a timeline. This is the number of new customers. It's very, very easy to see that something happened here. You can tell that immediately. So this is a good graph. Maybe should have a little bit more data here to orient us. Okay, conclusions. The conclusions give you a succinct summary of results. They compare your results with those of other studies, and they point out the strengths and weaknesses, and you have to be honest here, with the current study, and then brief speculation about the next research step. What needs to be done now, given my results? So, succinct summary of results, compare your result with others, point out strengths and weaknesses, the current study, and brief speculation. Then the conclusions. What you have to decide as a reader of the paper. Was the hypothesis testable? Did the author's methods constitute a genuine test of the hypothesis? Did the authors draw the correct conclusion from their results? And are you, as the reader, convinced by the author's claims? Okay, brief recap. Reading research studies is hard, but it'll make you a better observer and a more astute aromatherapist. Second, before reading, think about what you want to get from the study. Third, skim the study, look at the charts, take a few notes. Look up any terms you don't understand. Fourth, the abstract summarizes the research succinctly. The introduction motivates the research. The methods section tells what the researchers did. The results section tells what they found. And the conclusion tells what the researchers concluded from their results. Okay, there are a number of little articles that you can find on the web for further reading and make pretty much the same points I've made here. How to read a research study, Indiana University, for instance. And for some reason, I just went to the National Library of Medicine. Questions? What questions do you have?
In the world of aromatherapy, unlike the world of medicine, we typically have much greater volumes of participants in research studies and often placebo controlled studies. When we look at aromatherapy, is there a minimum threshold for credibility that you would tell us to be on the lookout for when we're evaluating a study?
Yes, if you cannot understand the hypothesis, um, if the introduction does not motivate the study, things like that I look for. Interestingly, if in on Pub 1, you can find some very deep and complex scientific studies of essential oils. In fact, I've reviewed quite a few of them lately. So I think there is the really hardcore scientific studies that are out there about essential oils, and then there's some that, in my opinion, don't adhere to that kind of rigor. They they tell you what they did, they're more like reviews, and I have nothing wrong. I have nothing to criticize about reviews, but um, if you do independent and original scientific work, you're going to get into um, the same things that we've been talking about. But in a narrow answer to your question, I'll look at the abstract, look at the introduction, look at the hypothesis, and if that doesn't satisfy me, I'll turn to the next article. Other questions?
There are no questions in the chat. So if anybody has any questions, just jump in.
Okay, I'll ask you one more. A lot of times there's a lot of debate for aromatherapy studies in trying to study only an individual component of an essential oil versus the oil as a whole. Just kind of curious your thoughts on that, just as a general observation in research.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easier to study a individual component, and I've found that most of the more numerous components in essential oils, you can find out information about them. Um, I, I do not think that um, one can extrapolate from one component to the effects of the essential oil. I think recently, in the last few years, there have been more uh, scientific studies. A lot of them come from Eastern Europe, in which they will get an essential oil and they'll do the GCMS right there in their lab, so they know what they're dealing with. Of course, they don't understand all the interaction of components. And I don't think in the West, I don't think we have a method of doing that, unlike traditional Chinese medicine, that does have a way of mixing components and predicting their outcomes. We don't have that in the West. In fact, we deal, well, you have Bactrim, Septra, certainly HIV meds, but most big pharma meds are single compounds. And I think that's something that we need very badly. How do we evaluate mixtures of things? And of course, essential oils are mixtures of 80 to 120 components. But more and more studies are coming out where they're using the essential oil, they're telling where they got it, they do the GCMS, and then after they evaluate the effect of the complete essential oil, they will say, well, maybe it's this component or that component, and they will check some of the individual components and see if they do the same thing that the entire essential oil does. That's an important question. Thank you.
Could you explain a little about what you meant about the how they do it in China versus how we do it here? Can you explain a little further? I didn't quite understand that.
Well, I don't either.
Oh,
I've
okay.
only had like Chinese medicine theory and clinic observation. I haven't had those courses. I know a lot of TCM practitioners, though, and several millennia ago, the Chinese figured out how to add individual herbs into a mixture for a particular problem. And ancient China had a vast civil service, and they have named the role of an individual herb in a mixture after some civil service job. And they use five element theory a lot. And for instance, one of the things that they will evaluate a possible component to a mixture is, does it enhance this season of the five element theory, or does it block it? And what does it do to the other ones? And they have ways of figuring that out. But I wish I understood this better, because I think they have something to teach the West. This cropped up with HIV theory in treatment. HIV replicates very fast, and its replication is pretty sloppy. So it makes new it puts new genes in there every time, and it replicates so fast that it's said that the HIV virus will go through its entire genome in one person in one day. So obviously you can't use a single medication, because the virus would develop resistance against it. So typically what they use is 3 different medications, and at least that they target 2 different aspects of the virus. But when the HIV researchers began compounding these drugs, they found that what they thought would work didn't work. That is, our theory was bad, and they had to empirically find some combinations that worked. And so they know these combinations work, then they go back to theory and have to revise the theory. So we, as far as evaluating mixtures and what each component does in the mixture, we're babes in the woods.
That would almost be like the study that you were talking about, wouldn't it, Bruce, where you actually have the theory match what your end results are in a way? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions? This has been fascinating, and I love the examples that you gave.
In fact, this goes back into medical history. There's, in the 1700s, there was a chemist and physician named William Withering, and he heard about a wise woman in Shropshire who used a mixture of herbs to treat dropsy, which was the old name for congestive heart failure. And he got the mixture, and he said, I isolated the active ingredient. So he assumed, this is a bias, he assumed that there was only one active ingredient, which turned out to be digitalis purpura, which is famous heart medication. But he assumed that none of the other components did anything. Maybe the mixture was better than digitalis alone. I don't know.
We're getting lots of thank yous, but no more questions. Elizabeth did share a Facebook link. I'm not sure, Elizabeth, if you want to let us know what that is.
That wraps up today's session. Thanks for tuning into the AIA Research Academy. This academy exists thanks to the generous support of the Gafasi Foundation and is here to make aromatherapy research fun, accessible, and relevant. Our mission is simple yet powerful: to educate, inspire, and connect a global community committed to advancing the science of aromatherapy. We envision a future where research is not just part of the conversation, but the culture. The best part, access is completely free. Simply sign up through the link in the description box below. And if you're an AIA member, the Academy is already part of your member benefits, putting powerful resources right at your fingertips. If you're passionate about deepening your understanding of aromatherapy through research, you're in the right place. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay connected with our latest sessions. We appreciate your curiosity, your time, and your commitment to learning.